Thanks, Kevin. Brandon, I'm going to kick us off, and then we're going to do a little round robin here with John. We're really happy to be here for the sponsor by Teachers Hacking. Made a trip through Knoxville last year for one time in our office. It's awesome work. So really happy to come here and share some of this work with you all. We gave a talk in Charlottesville last fall, and I opened with this slide. Really, this kind of slide showing the geological folds that happen here in the southern tip of Appalachia, and the show that to show that we're really all part of the same valley, extending from the Shenandoah Valley, Charlottesville, on down past Blacksburg, and to Tennessee Valley, which is where Knoxville is. And so that's where we work. That's where almost all of our work is, right here in Nestle between Great Smoky Mountains National Park and the Cumberland Plateau. And this area was a pretty hard place historically to live. It was the western frontier of our country's western expansion, and harnessing the natural resources here always proved to be difficult. The first people to really do this at scale was the Tennessee Valley Authority, established in 1933, and over the course of the next 10 years, they built 16 hydroelectric dams that harness the power of the Tennessee River and its tributaries through important and iconic dam projects that brought power and progress to residents of the Tennessee Valley. That same year, the Civilian Conservation Corps was established in 1933, and some of the first recruits were sent to a new project, which is the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And this was really the first opportunity for us to start to gain appreciation for the rugged natural beauty of our region. 1940, the park was officially opened, dedicated by FDR. It's no coincidence that the National Park and the TVA parallel one another. They were both two pillars of FDR's New Deal. And the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and the TVA are really kind of present in all of our work. When we work within the valley, we're always aware of this, especially for us in some of our early projects, early residential projects that are in places that might not exist without the TVA, or may be possible to get to. These are places like Norris Lake. Norris Lake was formed by Norris Dam, which was the first of those TVA dams. And it's a place where we completed one of our earliest projects, which was an off-the-grid cabin. And moving out to the edges of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, the houses that are really informed by their connection to the natural environment that they're in. And closer to home, residential projects that are really the forms are based on site constraints that are found there. Projects that are along the rivers that run through this valley, the Holston River, which starts in Kingsport and comes into Knoxville, where it meets the French Broad River to form the Tennessee River. The French Broad, by some accounts, is the oldest river in the United States. And when those two come together, just about a mile east of Knoxville, they do form the Tennessee River. So Tennessee is the largest river in the Tennessee Valley system. 652 miles and 9 blocks of dams that exist in this area. So that river flows right through the heart of downtown Knoxville as well. And in the early 1930s, if we go back in time just a little bit, this is a time when the TVA was based, and still based in Knoxville. And also the people who were championing the creation of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park were all located in this place. All right, so go back in here, and I got a little bit of mic here. But the three most impactful influences to our region that Brandon just touched on: TVA's impact, of course, to our physical landscape, it coincided with the CCC's conservation projects, both of which inform how regional modernist principles were introduced to our area. So for my part of this talk today, I'll discuss a very hands-on research endeavor that is focused on the works of a couple of architects that were intertwined with all three of those influences, while directly responding and reacting to those ideals with their own built works during the years of 1934 to 1935 in our state. Those two architects were Alfred and Jane West Klaus. Yes, a married duo of architects that originated
very different places. Alfred Klaus was born in Munich, Germany in 1906 and was educated at the Munich Technical Architectural School. Jane West, born in Grand Rapids, Minnesota in 1907. She was educated at the University of Minnesota, receiving her BA in Interior Architecture. They made their way to East Tennessee in 1934, specifically to Knoxville in 1935, where they resided until 1945. I'll try to share some of their background leading up to their time in Knoxville, because their immediate past was manifested in a very special place that is still being uncovered today. Our first bit of research started in 2013, which led us all the way back to Harris Volume 1, Edition 1, where I was able to find an initial treasure trove of connections that I still reference today. This document was written by Lawrence Wodehouse in 1989 at the College of Architecture and Design history professor, and at the time it was about all that Google could pick up about these two architects in online search. But it was from that white paper that allowed us to see how Alfred and Jane West, how connected they were to a lot of the famous architects that we study every day. Mies, Corbusier, Philip Johnson, Buchan, and this guy and her living in Knoxville, Tennessee. But we were not talking about it as part of our regional architectural history, nor studying their work prior to this effort that has many lessons to learn from. Even after reading the white paper, I was somewhat remiss. Knoxville has very few iconic buildings well-known modern architects, and certainly none that I knew of prior that were directly associated with two of the three modern masters. So let me try to give you a little background on each. Prior to them arriving in Knoxville in 1935, again, Alfred immigrated to the U.S. in 1930, but before he had ever set foot on U.S. soil, he had already accomplished something so remarkable, directly adjacent to one of the modern masters, while he was just starting his career while working in Germany at a very young age, around the age of 23 or 24 years old. Remarkably, Alfred was involved in the design, construction, and oversight of the Barcelona Pavilion in 1928-1929, while working in Berlin with Mies van der Rohe and Willy Wright. As we know, this is one of the most famous pieces of modern architecture still to this day. Through our research, we are fortunate to have found a few of these very rare construction photos of the Barcelona Pavilion from his archive of the original structure being erected in a very short time since. Even though the unexpected removal of this temporary structure occurred around the same time as Klaus's arrival in the U.S., that did not dissuade him from jumping into the next biggest thing happening in modern design here in the United States. Once he landed in the States, he found work with Howell Muscades, who were feverishly working on the very first international-style modern skyscraper in the United States, located in Philadelphia. Klaus worked in Howell Muscades' New York office, directly under William Muscades himself. Alfred was specifically responsible for the interiors and creation of the upper-level boardrooms with the building that still remains intact today. Work opportunities were rare overall during that time due to the Great Depression, but Alfred, along with another Howell Muscades employee, partnered on numerous entries for various design competitions and were fairly successful at it. But Klaus's mentor, Mies van der Rohe, while still in Berlin, had an impact on him even after Klaus immigrated in 1930. If you know the story, Philip Johnson convinced Mies van der Rohe to redesign his apartment in New York City in 1930. But Mies only agreed to that commission if Alfred could oversee the construction here in the States, as Mies was unable to travel to the States at that time for such a small project. However, that connection with Johnson would lead to many future connections for Klaus and Dobb over the next couple of years, including a new modern gas station, prototype for the Ohio Company, a house for Philip Johnson's mother, and it would afford him the ability to design his own line of furniture for his own apartment in New York City. Okay, so that was Alfred. Let's talk about Jane. Jane West, up until this, so I mentioned earlier that Jane West, an American born in Minnesota, where she attended the University of Minnesota to obtain her interior architecture degree. I can't recall exactly, but back in 2013, when I first started this research, soon after I discovered the Harris White paper that led me to Alfred's story, I learned that the Beverly Willis Foundation had identified Park, Jane West Klaus, is a pioneering woman of American architecture. And her feature is being written by a local university professor, Abigail Sachs. This was somewhat serendipitous. We were not in contact about this prior to this. But Abigail had already come connected with some of the surviving Klaus children, then in their late 70s at that time. But they were very willing to share their mother and their father's food. Jane's first stop after graduation was Chicago, working with the interior design firm of W. Nelson, which operated on Michigan Avenue, where she worked with well-known architectural practices like Holberg and Green. But because of the Great Depression, work was also scarce in Chicago and, of course, the profession as a whole. But her father was willing to support her and her sister on a trip to Europe around 1930. This trip would become a seminal moment in her career and life. When their tour of Europe brought them through Paris, Jane decided to remain there and approached Le Corbusier about an unpaid position in his atelier that he ran with Charlotte Perriand. Le Corbusier was not in the habit of hiring women, but Jane was very persistent, and he eventually relented, making her the very first American female to work in his atelier, and only the third woman after Perriand and Ingrid Wahlberg. She worked on projects like the Swiss Pavilion shown here and the Salvation Army in Paris. One comment she made shares the fact that nearly everyone in the office at that time had been trained in a different country, which led to some extremely interesting arguments on construction details, acceptable sizes, etc. She worked in the atelier for a year and returned to the States, specifically to New York, where she was able to meet others like Norman Rice and Alvin Gray. This is when she met Alfred while at his office. She was very intrigued with his work. She started collaborating in evenings with Alfred on competitions to stay active in the professions during the Great Depression. But it was in full swing at that moment. And without steady work, they decided to travel across the country together with Alfred's brother to see the national parks and much of the country as they could without At the end of their 5 months journey, they returned to work, this time in Chicago. Alfred would work alongside of Louis Skidmore, before the SOM, to assist in the planning efforts of the 1933 Chicago World's Fair, while Jane West found work with the interior design studio of Bandit Brothers. It is here in Chicago in 1934 that Alfred gets the telegraph from TVA, inviting him to interview Quincy. As Alfred said, he didn't even know where Quincy was at that time, as their cross-country journey did not take that much time. The TVA and its impact on our region is unmistakable. By 1934, there were more than 9,000 architects, engineers, and technicians who about. Some of those architects were names that have been included in our history books, or with their names adorned on plaques of buildings which are still celebrated for their work during and after the period. Roland Wank, of course, was the chief architect during those times and was responsible for the mandate of the modern the structures. Mario Bianculli, being his right hand, was responsible, or at least credited with, the design of 26 major dams and powerhouses during his tenure there. Charles Barber, son of George Barber, who was synonymous with the American house design, worked alongside of Wank on the groundbreaking Morris project, where he helped design crucial infrastructure in Newtown, Morris. His name lives on in our region still to this day, as he was the co-founder of the still operational Barber and Murray Architects. But there was one more name on that list that is just now starting to be recognized for his more public contributions at the TVA, and of course that is Alfred, but also within the present. So let's look at some of those public contributions first, to recognize how his past influences, his past mentors, would be employed in our region here in the South. Alfred worked in the housing division of the TVA that addressed worker housing. His work on modular housing for the worker population shown here to rendering some, if not the first, prefabricated modular housing produced in modern style. You can see here how the commonly referred to double wide was brought to a dam location so that the workers could have proper housing during the construction of the site-specific project, and it could be moved easily to the next site that could be reused. There was a program set up around these houses where the worker could purchase the home at a favorable relocated to a residential lot for permanent housing. We have found about 4 or 5 of these still in existence, nestled into our traditional neighborhoods, with of course no advised traditional modification for years. Alfred was also involved in the public realm, creating modern visitor centers and checkpoint structures at some of the dam sites. You can see his modern influence being carried out without a doubt, implementing new ideas, fortified with his past experiences from his other collaborative endeavors. As I noted, the names that rise to the top at the TVA are only a few, but we know from his archives of his role and involvement in these projects. Alfred also worked in the graphics and public relations department, where he was tasked to create wartime propaganda posters while also creating numerous exhibits for Senate hearings and for visitor centers themselves that he had designed. You can see here an original hand-painted image in the upper left corner that was used to create a poster that was then mailed out as propaganda to support the wartime effort. But you can also see his art being used as the backdrop for ribbon cutting at Douglas Dam that was constructed and only published for months. Jane was just as busy during her early years in her new southern city. Because of nepotism rules at the TVA, Jane West's house was unable to work there, so she directed her skill set towards the CCC efforts. She volunteered with the National Park Service and designed furniture for recreation areas and cabins on the shores of the newly created reservoirs. Her task was to design and teach fabrication of basic furniture to civilians, so that they too could create themselves these pieces of furniture. Designed for everyone was a consistent ideal that they both carried throughout their careers. But there was a crescendo moment building over these formative years that will be a culmination of all of their influences, both individually and shared today, that can be seen in their first built works, planned residential subdivision just a few miles south of downtown Knoxville. This project, named Little Switzerland, would be the first as a duo where the designs were under their sole directive and decision making. The impact of their modern colleagues and mentors, their travels, the influence of the TVA and the CCC are all being seen in this project. It includes many firsts never seen before designs or initiatives in this country, much less in the South in the late 30s and early 40s. Through our research, we learned that Faustus had master planned 10 international style homes that were deed restricted via the so-called modern architecture, as the snip of the deed says. And more importantly, it lists what cannot be built, identified by the names and styles in the so-called traditional architectural styles. This was later deemed the first deed-restricted subdivision in the country restricted to modern design. These words and mandates are simply amazing to us, and the group that is practicing in a contemporary way in the South. Only 5 of those 10 houses were realized, but they were all still in place on Little Switzerland Road. And now, I was starting to understand the depth and breadth of what we were uncovering. 5 houses shown here in their original form are international style examples. Easily the most authentic pieces of modern architecture in our city, and certainly the only subdivision of modern housing farming. A few other things we found remarkable about their work for our research. Alfred and Jane West were the first owner, architect, developer, contractor of their time in this country that we have come across in our research. We've also found that Jane West, one of 13 children, her father, had written history textbooks for higher education purposes. It was the royalties from these textbooks that would fund this residential development project. And I love the fact that history paid for history that I was uncovering. What I was just starting to uncover strayed far from these original photos. And this is what I found. I want to pause here, though. I'm going to say it before we get too far into it. And very sincere about everyone who has owned or touched these homes over time. Because what I've found with the 4 of the 5 houses is much different from the ones in the photographs. But I have no ill will towards them about the decisions they had to make livable for their own purposes. And they owned them. It was simply what life is. Sometimes we have to adapt and continue. This is what that looks like sometimes, at least for the layperson. In fact, I'm happy they lived there and did what they did because they still remain. Sure, they are missing pieces that I wish were still there, but what is that? flip side is, if they went dark or uninhabited, they would have been lost and further rot and decay. Entire structures would have been lost. The heat, sometimes the air was on. There was some sort of roof. In fact, there were four on the cabin alone. They're all wonderful people, and I'm glad to have had them through this journey. So I'll go through some of the things that we have covered along the way, and I hope more importantly, we'll look back in time in honor of the original work that was done in this very unassuming. You'll see many names for the houses, the articles and documents, and I've tried to name them in a little bit more intuitive way in honoring some of those that lived there with us. So House B, that I'll start with, is the Seymour Manor House, the house that I still live in today. Originally built in 1939, and in hindsight, it was one that was in the best condition of the ones that I've purchased. When I say the best condition, I do say that out of a severe case of PTSD that I currently have renovated. The metal press tile would simply fall off the wall when touched. The kitchen was almost original in 1939, therefore being more updated. Oh yeah, and I forgot about the fire. The electrical panel still had fire extinguisher residue all over it. The place was preserved, but not in a fully livable manner. There was much to do. We enhanced the exteriors, the interiors, and spaces remained where they were originally designed. But we felt as if we should embellish the deed restrictions at least on the interior and follow the rules of thou shalt not command. The central connecting stair was celebrated as it should be, as these are the first split foyer houses in the country, which allowed for a very compact footprint, which reduced construction costs while maximizing the number of bedrooms and bathrooms. Most of the houses are 3 or 4 bedrooms, all with 2 bathrooms, within 1,400 to 1,600 square feet. This is what we are all now chasing with this urgent, missing middle housing crisis that most cities like ours are now facing. And of course, the exterior was restored to its original character. Here you can see it in its original condition, and more now that putting it back the way it was, now that we've covered the documentation. Okay, so that was a brief summary of the first one, but the story doesn't end here, but maybe it should have, and would have, if the if not needed mentality didn't carry it forward. This next one that I will share is very special, but it took at least 4 times as long and 4 times as much money. The first one is truly a gateway drug. Known as the Redwood House, or House A, what is most important is the second house on Little Swiss Road, the houses that lived with the family. Before the beyond recognition, the standard playbook would be established and complete. Get it re-roofed immediately. Get it, even in the dry, remove all of the ill-advised additions to the property. Then once it was stabilized, we would figure it out, see what is missing, put it back together, begin with some of the exterior enhancements, modernize today's living standards. But usually, it was always much worse than known, and maybe even structurally deficient due to modifications made over the years. You are also seeing the start of the paint removal process starting here at the front door. And I think that area looked like a week. My shoulder was killing me just after that was and it wouldn't even there. As the 9-step paint removal process of the original redwood siding took over a year. I promise you, that you can still find some red on this house even without trying. But the original redwood was mostly intact. It was just waiting to show itself. The windows were their own project within a project. It's part of the reason this house took me so long to renovate. I removed the original sliding window panels, sanded the frames, removed the broken glass, and reinstalled new glazing stops in an effort to preserve the original custom window of the house design. But I can now confidently say, from first-hand experience, is to never design filter windows, especially in a climate like this. As the attempt to preserve was a waste of time, because the gasketing and hardware just couldn't keep insects and moisture out. After trying to get many window companies to sell me some unusually short sliding glass doors, and being dismissed due to the engineering department's rules, I was faced with all the suit, but I still rise against. He used his original drawings and created exact replicas of windows, modern hardware, and gasketing without creating dimensional discrepancies. We only deviated once to adjust the glazing block to accommodate a 1.5-inch insulated glazing to address the new south facing window. These units were made of mahogany and not redwood for obvious reasons associated with this rare species. The interiors were enhanced, and strict adherence to detailing was developed to honor the spirit of the original interiors without mimicking something that could never be replaced over time. Wood was scheduled where wood was, and the floor plan and overall layout was fully enhanced with kitchen and bathroom areas, which is typical for houses of this era. The exterior has been returned to its original quality while creating a centerpiece for the overall development that Klaus has left for us to uncover. You can see some of the passive sustainable qualities of the house with the solar shades, the rear windows, the obvious cross ventilation possibilities with the optical windows along the walls that are now properly insulated on all surfaces. From the amount of documentation found in notes from both family, friends, and publications, I'm certain the process felt that this was their best work. So we did our best to honor the legacy. Here's a before and after comparison showing that the original form was returned as the house. So that was what I now refer to as Klaus House 2, as it was the second house we lived in on the whole system. So to confuse you even more, I would share a little of the ongoing work on Klaus House 1, which is just across the street, and was one of the first two constructed. It's labeled here as Klaus House C. You may remember this style of house, but it's based on a mirror image of the first one we reviewed. Since this was his, he baked in some unique nuances to this one. Here you can see it in its original form from the late 30s and early 40s. But again, we were blessed with this offense. The front had been added onto, a vestibule, if you will, was added to the porch area, but there was also a large addition rear that was a main living space for the previous occupants. All had to be moved, of course. On my request, they ended up leaving quite a bit of debris in the house, but I had to remove the final stuff. But as we know, the good stuff, or at least the oldest stuff, will be at the bottom. I did find some drawings, new window hardware that was still in the box, and some of the glass block that was missing from the porch of the box. I haven't been sharing many plans, but these houses are remarkable when it comes to how compact and dense they are. They're utilizing the split foyer as we discussed before, with public spaces to the right, the bedroom spaces to the left. And that program breakdown translates to the lower floor as well, with all the kitchen and dining spaces from the lower level and to the right of the stair, four elements, and the other two bedrooms to the left. This one has an outdoor garage in lieu of the in-house one that mine originally had. Say it with me, number 1,400, 4-bedroom, 1,400 square foot, 4-bedroom, 2 bathhouses. This is what we need to be building our own today. Basically, this is found the missing housing we are still today. A sneak peek of the before and after this was still wrapping up, and luckily a little bit of a snowfall for those instances. And one more showing the before as found and after spanning 86 years. Last but not least, and really is the one that created the title of the recent exhibition itself, and is the one that I'm most excited about. This fourth renovation we simply call the Klaus Cabin, shown here is labeled House F. And it was built in 1940, which was third in order of their construction, just after Klaus House 1, the single manor house. A lot of people think that this was the first one based on the rustic painting. This small cabin was used as a guest house for Klaus, and it embodies all of the characteristics of regionalism or regional models. It takes on the East Tennessee vernacular of a log cabin with filled trees from the house sites that had just been completed, and marries it with a Bauhaus-inspired international style ribbon window system focused solely on the views of the slopes. Its siding was also sensitive to the rest of the district while maximizing its footprint by creating outdoor spaces with a flat roof deck and a covered outdoor space under the cantilever while still allowing a view over it from Klaus House 1 across the street. This is another deed requirement regarding access to views. But again, in true fashion, it looked like this just 2 years ago. This one was almost beyond recognition. This one has created such a dramatic before and after that the drive to get the additions removed has been very motivating and stay satisfying. And the view from the street had a very negative impact on the district. So that so much that the state historic preservation officer said that it would be non-contributing to the district if ever submitted for consideration. And as a sidebar note, we were told not even to submit prior to our involvement, as the district was too far gone. But we have shown them that the originals were still intact enough to create a national register. They have backtracked on that, and now they say that it's eligible for the work completed today. We have submitted our first round to the State Historic Preservation Office, and we hope to reach that milestone this year. So starting back on April 6, 2024, we embarked on a partial demolition process to remove all of the additions and take some photos of this iconic structure included in our national register. It took a few months dealing with phasing weather with a degree of care and with a degree of care. It was calculated from the dumpster pulls that we removed about 29 tons of house, all by hand, preserved what we wanted to keep. This original tracing shows its relationship to the site, elevated, and covered outdoor spaces, and just generally how awesome it is. It is truly one of a kind. And the plan is a little faded here, but I hope you can see the 50-50 split of programming between public and private spaces, along with just how simple this is and effective it is adapting to the site. This is how it sits today, ready for the renovation. But at least I can send in the photos and photos that will be considered contributing, since most of its parts are still there. And she shows Faust's ingenuity in designing these now fairly normal considerations. This is the first evidence of regional modernism, and it is something that we as architects, especially ones practicing in the South, should know about. The notoriety of the work Faust did is growing. I hope that the awareness of the work that we are doing is raising a new conversation about historic and modern architecture in the South. We are still battling some of the same issues Faust has experienced in the 1940s. The work has been published in the Wall Street Journal, received a couple of national design awards from the U.S. Residential Design Magazine. This recognition is long overdue for their exploratory and groundbreaking. We've also hired our friends over at Fort Urbanism and engaged in a master planning process to plan for what could happen in and around the existing houses. They came up with a lot of collateral, and some of the ideas are already being implemented for the backwood area, specifically for an exterior sculpture project. And of course, physical connection back to the local trail system that started this whole thing. Incorporating walking trails, sculpture gardens, establishing it with end use, still roll out cheap learning. Sounds very TBA, CCC, and regionally appropriate. We hope that the Faust.
I think that's a fascinating story, about a specific time, a specific place, and it's a personal story that John invested in for so long, and it's a very private story. But, where it is here located in an area that we've been focused on a lot of public work dating back to about 2016. I'm going to dig into a couple of those public projects and talk about the process of that in an area that is called Knoxville Suburban Wilderness. So you can see the little switch located at the bottom of this area, and at the top left, you see the area called Battlefield Loop, which is one of a collection of sites in this space. So Battlefield Loop is a project that we started planning in 2016. Our design team included people from fabricators, ecologists, and historians, and also other specialists like Fort Urbanism, like John just mentioned, who we worked together with to come up with a bottom-up master plan for the site. This site had already been given the name Battlefield Loop, which is ironic because it's the Battlefield Loop. That's a whole separate story and a whole separate lecture. So our task here was to provide connections between some important but isolated sites within this 600-acre area in South Knoxville. And it's an area that had been undergoing a lot of development pressure since probably the early 2000s. As we saw this kind of viral development pattern start to emerge with substandard housing projects for students, to invite students, their families, families to live big and treat yourself with amenities like 20-foot jumbotrons, 30-person hot tubs, lazy rivers, and such. And this type of development was scheduled to cover this entire stretch of land that was just over the river from the University of Tennessee until the recession started. And that was about 2009, and that gave an opportunity for groups like nonprofits like the Legacy Parks Foundation and the Aslan Foundation to step in and preserve these spaces for future generations. And so, with the donation of the River Bluff property, number 2, to the city of Knoxville, about 300 acres of this area was under control of either the city of Knoxville or the Aslan Foundation, which is who commissioned us to do this study. So as we looked at the transportation corridor along Chapman Highway and the industrial corridor along the Goose Creek, we started to see the connective tissue here that would give us the boundaries of the Battlefield Loop. So working with Port Urbanism, we wanted to zoom into 5 areas within this to look at not just the sites themselves, but also people who would use them, try to understand nodes and connections in a way what they should be, in a way that a top-down master planning process really doesn't have. So we looked to the patterns of different groups and how they would use spaces within the site. We looked at groups like Civil War aficionados, running hiking clubs, and also birding groups. Just one example of this, we cross-reference the birding groups that are interested or operating in Knoxville, the types of birds that they're interested in, the types of habitats those birds like, where do you find those habitats within Battlefield Loop. With that, we started to create these loose networks and pathways through the site. And when you start to overlay those different types of user groups within these zones, you can understand the intensity of use that might start to necessitate things like connections with parking or amenities or other bathrooms and things like that. And that allowed us to set the stage for a programming study, which the programming study was something that we then worked with the city of Knoxville so they could develop prioritization for different public projects within this area. The first of those public projects within the Battlefield Loop that was prioritized for development was Augusta Quarry at Fort Dickerson Park. So this is a space that was donated to the city in the 1990s. People would swim there illegally until the city started patrolling in about 2014. And so it became legal to swim there, but it didn't mean it was safe to swim there. So the cliffs around the perimeter inspire people to jump, and there were probably 2 or 3 deaths happening a year there. It's one of the reasons this was prioritized for development. So in Knoxville, in and around Knoxville, we're known for a certain type of stone, Tennessee marble, what it's called. You see them around from DC and all over the country, really. So we expected in our research to find that this was a marble quarry. But we found it was not a marble quarry, but it didn't mean that there wasn't an interesting story to be told here. We started to do overlays of USGS maps from the 1930s through the 1970s. You see that what was once a hill equal in size to the adjacent Fort Dickerson was slowly eroded and actually removed where it became a whole different landscape. And if you look to the left, my pointer doesn't work, but you see Fort Dickerson, and there's a line of fortifications above Civil War there. That was the line of fortifications that was defending Knoxville from a Confederate advance from the south, showing this map that Captain Orlando Poe created during the siege of Knoxville. The further research led us to understand what happened after the Civil War, where this location along the banks of the Tennessee River meant that it was ripe for industrial development, as things like slaughterhouses, machine shops, also textile mills became to be located there. So what we found was really this site kind of had 3 lives. There was the time before the industrial era, which included the time around the Civil War, those 7 or so decades operating as an industrial site, and that post-industrial sublime space that we see today. So the first phase of this project brought access and infrastructure to the edge of the quarry, completed in 2019, and the second phase, which was just completed last summer, extended those amenities down to the edge of the quarry. So you really have an opportunity to experience the magic of this place. So the program included new buildings at the top of the quarry ramp, following the original quarry ramp down to the boardwalk to access the water, and a circular swim platform, which is super cool in the summertime. So those buildings include a vendor kiosk, 3 restrooms, and a dressing. Again, they opened July 4th of last year, incredibly active since that time. And these are buildings that we have jokingly referred to them as perma bodies because they replace the porta potties that serve the space for so long, but they operate a similar way. They rely on passive ventilation, no forced air ventilation. So in doing that, we've never done a building like this that doesn't have fans, that doesn't have things like that. So we wanted to make sure that we were studying how we could do that in a way that we could allow for ventilation while also still maintaining privacy in these natural spaces. So we're really happy that the city of Knoxville really allowed us to kind of go down this path. And where we landed was a structure which is wrapped in these 410 shingles that kind of fold up like gills around the perimeter to allow air to move through. And there is open at the top and bottom, perforated at the top and bottom to allow that airflow, and it's actually open to the sky as well. So there are 5 buildings. They're all built in a similar way. We have a concrete base which attaches to the sewage system and provides water and all. Then there's a shop fabricated case piece stainless steel attached to that. 410 structural frame on that, and then wrapping that in a building like the vendor kiosk that you see here are those 410 shingle builds. And that vendor kiosk is the first building that you see as you sit down from the parking lot along the quarry edge, which is that same circulation that happened when this was active. Down to the boardwalk, looking back towards those buildings that really shine like fireflies. So history, like John talked a lot about history. History is very important to us, and we want to make sure that we're capturing and communicating the stories that we learned about this place. So we worked with a graphic designer, Robin Easter Design, to try to interpret some of those stories about the few lives of this space, going back from the time during the Civil War, Fort Dickerson, the quarry that we found during the industrial time, ultimately through that post-industrial time that we find today, where this site is a public anchor to the western end, an area that's been branded Knoxville's Urban Wilderness. So Knoxville's Urban Wilderness is it's a kind of an economic development engine and a tourism. It's also a space that has amenities for people in Knoxvillians to use every day. It's been a really important part. It's become a really important part of our identity over the last probably 10 or 20 years. And so it really started to gain momentum in 2016, about the same year we started to put out the group. So the city, they hired a consultant to try to develop priorities for how certain sites within the urban wilderness would begin to be developed. And so they had identified a site right at the middle of this, which was at the end of James White Parkway, which would be called the Gateway into the Urban Wilderness. You see, it's located right in the middle between the Battlefield Loop that we just talked about, and also South Loop sites, which include things like another industrial marble quarry, nature center, and a wildlife management area, among many other things, miles and miles of trails. So when we started to look at how the connections between these sites could be established, provide that connectivity, we saw this could really become an economic development driver within one of the more economically depressed areas of Knoxville. But as written, the RFQ, request for qualifications, focused only on part and determination of James White Parkway. So once we were selected for the project along with our friends at Porter Urbanism, we made the case that we should extend this space all the way up the length of this road, James White Parkway, connecting into an area called Morningside Park, which had Morningside Park. A lot of people who live there have memories of when this road was built and the kind of negative impact and devastation that brought to them. And to understand that devastation fully, you can go back in time again to the 1930s, such a pivotal moment in the development of Knoxville. It's a time in the 1930s when the grid in East Knoxville was still connected to the downtown grid of downtown and neighborhoods north and south. In 1936, the Knoxville Housing Authority was established, and one of their first projects was a slum report, which was published in 1939. And 1 year after that report was published, the first slum removal project began in Knoxville. It demolished 47 homes, displaced 53 families for the construction of the new Austin Homes housing project. 1960s brought the interstate, and it also brought the first phase of the James White Parkway. The James White Parkway was described in this article as a downtown loop highway with floaters. This article also talked about the 97 acres of developable land that was a part of this, that resulted from the removal of over 500 buildings and displacement of more than 350 families. Many of those families would be relocated in the second phase of the Austin Homes housing project, which was described in this article as low-rent housing for renters. So, subsequently, many projects followed during a period of urban renewal, including Morningside Project, which developed Civic Coliseum. This one displaced, removed under 72 buildings, 3 businesses, 2 churches. And by 1978, that road, James White Parkway, had extended all the way to the river. Effectively separating, providing a barrier between these residents of East Knoxville and everything else in downtown Knoxville. In the 1980s, that road was extended over the river to connect to a road that was the first 2.2 miles of a planned bypass to bring people around Knoxville, people who wanted to go experience the Blue Mountains National Park. Not a road constructed for Knoxville, constructed for people passing through Knoxville. This is where it ended. A place we call the terminus, the end of this 2.2-mile road nowhere. So I say we were selected to do the project with port urbanism, and the city agreed. They said, we will look at a study that takes us all the way up to the James White Parkway. And so we started to look at how we could start to plan what would happen with that 2.2 miles of space, 113 acres of space. So we started to think about how this roadway could actually become something that provides connections into these, what used to be a barrier, to be something much more than that. It provides access and connections into the adjacent neighborhoods. It connects all this to a framework of continuous amenities and infrastructure with distributed nodes and destinations across the land. So we presented that to the Tennessee Department of Transportation, and actually agreed. They accepted it. They said, yes, you can have a road from the river all the way down to the terminus. They also gave us the light to make that important connection over the river, connecting urban Morningside Park and Wilderness. So it is a multi-phase project. The first phase does focus on the end of James White Parkway, connecting that roadway into the mountain biking trails and the Reserve. And that future connection, future phase, would connect over into East Knoxville. And really, the future phase, the big idea here is that the way that we were doing that was to redirect traffic. The northbound lanes of traffic would be moved to the southbound lanes, which effectively would be that 2.2-mile strip that could be programmed with pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure and amenities and such. And so we saw this as our opportunity to reclaim these underutilized or obsolete infrastructure in a similar way that other cities have begun to do it. These are projects that have become economic development drivers, tourism tools, and also that provide fitness and recreation opportunities for residents. So it all starts right here at the terminus and the James White Parkway. It was the first phase had multiple parts. So we'll talk about it this way. The first part of the first phase connected the end of James White Parkway into Baker Creek Reserve. It also included the construction of a new pavilion at the base of the bike park and other amenities. And that pavilion was completed in 2024. It's a Corten steel pavilion that's teamed around the event lawn at the base of the Bike Skills Park, which is incorporated into the Nelson Mountain Biking Trails. So the building's programmatically very simple. It's got bathrooms, it's got wayfinding, of course it's got shade because it was really hot in Knoxville. And so we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity for people to take a break from biking or exploring trails, playground structures, and such. Structurally, it's also a pretty simple idea that was pretty complicated to build. So it's a 12 by 18 structural grid that's wrapped with 2 by 2 410 diagrid, and attached to that are continuous sheet perforated corrugated 410. And it's really become kind of a trail marker and identifiable moat within the trail system at Beaver Creek Reserve. But the shade was really one of the more complicated parts of this, coupled with the complex curvature that came from the structure as we wrapped it around. So we used a combination of analog and visual tools to try to work this out, physical models, understanding how we can make these shade canopies that start to define spaces at both ends of the canopy. And what we learned with this complex curvature of the building is that every single component of this was different. Nothing was the same. And so we had to do other drawings, which were treated more or less like dress forms. So these were sent to the fabricator to cut individual pieces that would become the shade sails. We also wanted these to be a little bit more fitted than what we found in what you see in some of these types of shade sails. So we developed this detail that has the shoelaces that tie it back to the structure. We tested this too. We're always looking to test some of this stuff at full scale, in this case at half scale, just to make sure we're improving concepts. So we're testing the attachment methods of the canopies. We're also starting to test the colors. We're trying to make sure that we're incorporating this into colors that have been established again by Robert Eastern Design as a part of branding of our skate park. So here we went with orange, not UT orange, it's probably more like cookie orange, I would assume. But it's the orange was one of those colors that was adopted as part of this palette. See also how the structure creates this cantilevered space that's the backdrop for different events that can happen along this event, parties and such that happen at James White, at Baker Creek. Things like Appalachian mountain biking fall festival, which brings mountain bikers all over the country to explore these things, the trails and amenities that we got. And this has been such a huge economic development driver. This is a report from 2023 that shows the economic impact of this $25 million. This is a $10, $11 million investment by the city. This is a return on that investment. We've also seen the project get traction nationally with publications and such. Really, it's about not just about the buildings themselves, but about really the big idea of what's happening in this project, what it's connecting to. Recently, the third part of the first phase was completed. That's the second canopy that provides that connection from the James White Parkway into the wilderness beyond. It's a similar building, but it's the geometry in this case is keeps to follow the general slope of the roadbed. It also keeps to accept 3 concrete piers that come down to support the overpass above. So the building's effectively threading underneath the overpass. The ribbon was just cut on this 2 weeks ago. This is the mayor inaugurating the building. And so it was a lot of fun to be there and see this space active. It's not just a building, it's also other amenities that activate the space underneath the overpass. So formally underneath a lot of space, something that has picnic areas, play structures, and the like. This is a picture from that opening. It's so exciting to see the space active. I can't imagine how active it will be this summer. So it's been a lot of fun working with the city on that project and completing what we call the first phase of the project. It's also been a long time. This is 10 years of work for us and the representatives with the city. This is the first sidewalk project kicked off in 2017 with the city's project manager and me and another member of the design team walking this roadway. And nearly 10 years later, the ribbon cutting with that same yellow showing up as the canopies of the structure. So I mentioned that this was the first phase. So the second phase is the one that transforms the roadway all the way across into urban Morningside Park in downtown. It's the most ambitious part of the project and also the most expensive. And so we were really proud in 2024 when the mayor and the city of Knoxville used the work that we had done, leveraged this to get what was the largest federal grant of its kind in the city of Knoxville's area, $42.6 million through a program called Reconnecting Communities. Reconnecting Communities was a program that was part of the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. What it was for was to create investment in areas within our country that had suffered disinvestment that was directly associated with the impacts of the river. So the completion of that road is what you see here in orange, but there are other important parts of this as well. And the blue and the green are some of those important connections that happen within the communities of East Knoxville that were so heavily impacted. And this work and the grant submission from the city built upon another study that we did with the city of Knoxville, the Development Corporation, and our friends at Port Urbanism, where we started to study the infrastructure that serves these areas and trying to understand what opportunities we might have within these spaces. We also looked at specifically the impacts. What were those renewal projects and what impact did they have? We started mapping where some of the areas like what was really Black Knoxville's downtown core at Vine Avenue, which was 100% removed as part of Summit Hill project, was the last piece of it, which is the last of these projects. Also, there are groups, Knoxville groups that work collecting stories of people, places that are impacted, that were lost. People like the Beck Cultural Center. It has a project that was called the Beck Cultural Corridor. The Beck Cultural Corridor is something that tells the story, physically tells the story on the ground through this Reconnecting Communities grant and fund project that was previously telling stories about important Knoxvillians like Buford and Joseph Delaney, both artists, also the poet Nikki Giovanni, who's in the May Memo. She taught for decades, I believe. So her house, her grandmother's house, was removed as part of the Morningside project in Knoxville. She was involved in that. And so these stories about people like Nikki Giovanni's grandmother's house that was removed are here. They're stored in these boxes. These are stories that are just waiting to be told. Yeah, this is an unfunded project until the Reconnecting Communities grant came along. So we were extremely excited to see what was going to happen next with this. But this is 2024. Some things that happened since then. So obviously we had an election. Election happened, and so talking with our representatives from the city of Knoxville, the Knoxville Community Development Corporation, we're told that these are previous allocations. Previous federal allocations can only be taken away. They're an act of Congress that can only be taken away with an act of Congress. There's no way that these projects are ever going to be impacted until an act of Congress, the big beautiful bill, actually. So communities like Knoxville, the story that I just told is the same story. Communities all across the country. $2.4 billion unspent money rescinded as a part of the Reconnecting Communities program that was removed from the federal budget. And at the same time, we see 30 times that amount increase going into the federal budget to create, to reinforce what is now the largest police force. This police force in our country is coming into this community, which is now filled with immigrants, doing the exact opposite of the Reconnecting Communities program had intended. So I just want to close right there and say that the social impact of this cannot be underestimated or overestimated. And the economic impact of communities like the one in East Knoxville cannot be underestimated. Election matter. We'll stop there.
Thanks, guys. That was great. Open it up for some questions.
Thank you for that.
I would say that you are studying urban design and landscape architecture, probably. I think I'm not trained. I'm not trained as an urban designer or a landscape architect. These are the things that our interests as architects. Training that I'm sure you're getting talking about urban issues, talking about issues of landscape architecture that extend beyond landscape. Landscape architecture has evolved. Sometimes people maybe 20 years ago started calling landscape urbanism different terms for that. It extends outside. When I was in school, I used to think about what landscape architecture is. It's about ecological frameworks. It includes history. It includes all kinds of underpinnings of what urban design is. So I think as an architect in architecture education, we can seek out what you want to find within there. It's not something that you specifically have to have some sort of designation. That's not. I would say be curious. As curious as possible. Those boxes are really where you need to start. Right? Get into those things. That's what the strengths are. That's what you'll uncover. And I don't think the degrees can help you figure that out. I think that's going to be something no one's ever seen. So they stay curious. John, when we visited you guys talked about this a little bit with our group when we came to the office. I think part of your initial engagement with this was an engineering project. And someone said, what the design involved. I think you question the problem, just a challenge the problem. Maybe you can speak a little bit about how these things. I think we're talking about the term this project, Wilderness Gateway. The second structure, the one under the bridge, is what Kevin's referring to. And I think when we started that again, what Brandon said is they told us to do 2 pavilions, and that was really it. Us trying to expand, not the scope for our own best interest, but the best interest of our city to connect it back to these places that have been somehow bifurcated with roadways or infrastructure, or steel box, news, that interrupt the urban fabric. So I think those are the things that you should always kind of challenge. I mean, there is a prompt. I mean, we get RFQs all the time, and we try to apply for it in the way that they actually ask for. But the second, like Brandon said, the second we got at the very first meeting, we're already challenging really what are the boundaries of the project itself. So that was the success of that. And it'll still have to be. Might be another 10 to 12 years. We'll see. Any questions?
So with the removal of federal funding, but with projects that return us so good economic returns, has there been any attempt by the Knoxville local government or the Tennessee local government to provide funding for similar projects?
Yes. Short answer is yes. But the longer answer is the $42 million that was a federal grant. That represents, I might get this wrong a little bit, but I think that's the entire capital improvements budget that the city of Knoxville would have in given years. So their budget might be $8 million. 3 of it might be capital projects. I think that's true. City government does these sports trash pickup stuff like that. So you're talking about if you want this done over 5 years, that's a significant portion of your capital investment money. So it comes out of what acre is just astronomical. So it becomes a more challenging proposition politically to try to drop all of your investment in a single spot. There are state funding sources and stuff that are still there, not to fund this project. This is the whole thing branded as a DEI project. So it's not going to be federal money. And in a state like Tennessee, you're probably not going to have state money or state resources behind any of these letters. So there are other projects. There's a pedestrian bridge project we're involved in connecting to Tennessee campus across the river. It's a $20 million state grant. And it's a $25 million federal grant. And that's still in place because it's not branded as a DEI project. So initiatives are still there. They're part of the urban awareness and connectivity projects that connect better together. Just nothing that's connected in that near future.
Maybe one more.
you talk about the role of paradox in practice? It seems like you're simultaneously working like extra large and extra small, areas storing developers. I don't know. So I wonder like how these dualities, dichotomies start to one another and sort of how that becomes architecturally.
That was deep. I'll say that from a business practice standpoint, it doesn't make a lot of sense at all. We've been asked before, do you get paid for the research? Sometimes, depending on your client. So we've been fortunate to have a local foundation that we've worked with. A lot of this early work was funded by that foundation, not just the work that we've done, but the board, and also other historians to help on some projects. And that's been the foundation for some of this work. And then a lot of it extends on just kind of nights, weekend, of curiosity and just interest. And so we try to piece that stuff together. It's kind of interesting though, because we're doing a lot of this research-based stuff. It does lead to projects, but it's like you're putting together. It's like a puzzle. You can find different sources. We have great sources in Knoxville. We had a photographer that took pictures of just about everything in the first half of the 20th century. So if you know where to look, you can kind of find things. It's amazing how many times we found the same thing happening and like across the street from each other in the same year. That year of 1936 to me, that just happens to be the year that USGS also published that map. That was the 1936 map, and that was such a critical moment. So it's like we find out that connect the dots. Yeah, so talk about the developer side of it and all the other stuff as we do that on that.
And we're not developers. We do it for our living. We do it because we're trying to somehow fix our city and with our skin in the game sometimes. And so we don't make our living on it. It helps with things that are passion projects, like Switzerland. That's not part of our business makeup. We're traditional architects in that way, business practice, but it doesn't form, like Grant said, it's all pieces in this. That's how we are actively learning. Same skill set she was talking about with landscape architecture. We don't have that either. I didn't have that skill set when I got out of our institution in Knoxville, so we have to learn all that. That's what we do with the jobs. So I don't know, it's not a very great answer, but it is kind of just